So we are a flower farm here in the Midwest, southwestern Illinois, and I got a little wild and crazy here to grow cutting roses. We used to grow roses here in the Midwest in outside and in heated spaces way back when. And over time, through different political things and all of that, we basically have gotten away from that. And most of our cut flowers are now grown outside of the United States and shipped in, or we see a lot of cut flowers grown out in California and Florida, like those warmer areas that have a better all around climate year round. So I have this unheated high tunnel space. It gets pretty toasty in here. It's actually really toasty right now. This is February. And I am wanting to really utilize this space more. And it's been kind of a dream of mine to be able to produce quality cutting roses from my Midwestern Illinois flower farm. Uh, Now, dreaming is one thing and doing is another. So we've also put these plans out on paper and been able to pencil things out if we can get a certain price per stem and all of the other variables line up, we should be able to make a profit on these cutting roses. So I am dedicating one of my basically 80-foot long rows in my high tunnel to cutting roses specifically. So I will link a video where I discussed planting cutting roses at a different property of ours and why we chose to do that. But this is basically an update on that video. I am actually in the process of moving all of those roses here now. I had 50 roses and we lost a couple due to weather and stuff like that. But so what you see in front of me is some sad looking roses maybe, but some of those are ones that we actually dug up and are moving. So I know there's going to be some transplant shock. They weren't in the best soil over there as well, so it's another reason why I wanted to move them. And I think I'm going to be able to control the soil and the water and all of that a lot better over here. So we're taking a chance and we're moving them because really where they're at, they're just languishing. So I also have several other varieties that have been in pots over the winter. So I'm just going to be planting those as I go. And then I have some older roses that are great for cutting as well that I'm going to try to propagate more of to also add to the cutting patch. But for right now, we're just sticking with the roses that we've already had. They were ordered as bare roots and they were either planted over at the cutting patch across the road in some really horrible heavy clay soil. We're moving those over here, or we are planting the roses that have been in pots over the last year because we've had a small rose nursery ordered in bare roots and resold those. And so basically the varieties that are great for cutting that didn't sell last year, I am planting. So right now you can see the beginnings of me planting here.
Now, I started off with about 50 roses. I had 5 varieties, 10 of each variety, and I chose those varieties based on some research that I had done, mostly studying farms in the US that were not in the Midwest region. I also chose varieties that were grafted. My first mistake was ordering grafted roses. Now, I don't think that there is anything wrong with grafted roses in some respects. I definitely think there are people way smarter than I and way more experienced than I that have had great success with grafted roses. There seems to be some varieties that just perform better on different rootstock. They perform form completely differently on their own roots. But the problem is that we have some very tumultuous winters and springs. The plants get a little bit confused, and it seems like we have some issues with grafted roses not surviving or not doing well in the garden. So I regretted, once I had done some research, I regretted planting grafted roses. My second mistake was that the property where I was growing my roses on, yes, we had a lot more space. We were thinking about moving there. We were thinking about building a house in this spot, and it just seemed right where I was going to put it. But the problem was that the soil was absolutely wrong. Very, very heavy clay. I mean, very extremely heavy river bottom clay, to the point where it was exhausting to dig all of those holes, and I couldn't use something like a soil auger on the back of a tractor or anything like that to make my life easier, because the clay is so sticky. It just sticks to anything. So you can imagine when the roots are trying to grow in this hole, if I can barely get my shovel in, if I can barely manage the soil myself. Granted, plants are amazing, but it's just not going to be the best environment for a rose. No matter how well you amend the hole, it was a recipe for disaster, and they really never took off. So after a few years of those roses growing over there, they just really hadn't done much.
You can kind of see that everything's spaced fairly close together. I'm more of about an 18 inches apart, and I tried to stagger them throughout the bed, but it hasn't worked out the best. Basically, been reading a lot about early rose production in the United States, specifically in the early 1900s. Been referencing an old book called Commercial Rose Culture by Eber Holmes, and that's been a really valuable resource. He's specifically talking about growing roses mostly in greenhouse spaces and how they would do that, and obviously working with different varieties. But they were growing them all year round, having blooms all year round. So I don't anticipate that to happen here because it does get cold in here in the winter. It is warmer than the outside, but it is still really cool, especially at night. It doesn't hold the heat very well. But the benefit of a space like this is that during the day, the soil gets heated up a lot. And then at night, the air will still be kind of cool in here, but the soil is much warmer. So we may see blooms later into the fall or earlier in the spring once these things get going. But they used a fairly close plant spacing. They were spacing things 12 inches apart in some cases. Now, with that, they were really pushing their plants hard, and they didn't expect to have those plants for the long term. They often would replant every 3 years or so, depending on the variety. I'm hoping to get more than just 3 years out of these plants. So I did increase the spacing a little bit, and I may end up losing some of these plants just because I've had to move them. It's just not ideal to be moving large shrubs around. So I do anticipate maybe losing some, unfortunately. But for right now, I do still see some green on the stems, and I'm going to come back and I'm just going to prune off the dead parts and take the height down and just get them ready to go. So what I've been doing is planting, and then I'm coming back in with some compost and layering the compost on, heaping it up pretty high. It's got cow manure and just our own compost that we've made. So I'm layering that pretty heavily on the roses, and which is something they did back in the early 1900s. They had access to cow manure, and that was a huge thing in this book. Actually, he talked about nothing better than that. So we're putting that on, and then I'm gonna go through and pull off any of the leaves that have remained on the plants. You can see further down there's some of the roses kept some of their leaves a little bit longer. So I'm going to be taking all of those off, pruning and everything, and really pushing the water and getting them going. So I really haven't pushed water much as I've been planting. I did kind of like give them a couple buckets but I'm not haven't turned on the irrigation or anything like that. So that's my goal for this week, is to just finish planting. We have more roses to move, more roses to plant. So we may not get the full row complete this year because I don't have enough roses for that. And there's a few roses that I actually want to put outside instead of in here because I know they get much larger. But these are all mostly hybrid teas or shorter floribundas that we're planting in here right now. So in my experience, it doesn't seem like the hybrid teas really, some of them don't seem to get super large. They're just a lot more lanky looking, so we can push that spacing a little bit more. But I have some other varieties like Princess Charlene de Monaco and Earth Angel that are a lot more robust and vigorous. And I have some older plants of those, and they are very huge. And I don't want to plant those in here because I don't feel like that would be worth it. They're so great outside, first of all, and second of all, I'm not really sure that spacing wise, having that tight spacing would be appropriate for them. The Charlene de Monaco, for example, got really extremely tall last year, like way over my head. So they're very upright, but they're very, very tall. And so I don't think that putting them inside a small enclosed space like this would be the best for that. I think they do great outside. So they're a great candidate for that. Definitely do your research on cutting roses for sure. But I'm going to be filling up this row as far as I can. This is actually where I had the potted roses last year. I had some black landscape fabric. You can kind of see the roll back there. It's funny because I bought that, but I'm trying to transition away from plastics on the farm. So it's kind of this limbo of using them and using what I have still and not buying new, but then having some things that I didn't use and should I use it or not, and all of this thing. So, um, but well, yeah, last year we had the potted roses here just for a easy way to like manage the inventory and all of that. And so any of the remaining roses I have, I've actually moved to my smaller tunnel, and we'll be planting most of those, and there'll be a few for sale this spring. Ones that aren't great for cutting, anyways. And we'll be experimenting with some varieties. Um, I have some climbers and stuff like that that I am gonna go ahead and put in the production row because I think I can prune them in a certain way that they'll be great for cutting.